Hello landlords, it's Ernie. I'm here to talk to you about what you need to do to avoid an eviction. Let's get started. For those of you returning to this channel, thanks so much for coming back. If you've never been here, consider subscribing. Click like if you enjoyed this video. And what I want to know are your comments. Leave those below. I do my best to answer every comment we receive. So how does a landlord avoid an eviction? Well, it can be a complicated thing. And so today I'm going to give you 4 tips you can consider for avoiding your next eviction. The very first one comes really before the lease is signed. It's all about screening your tenants. If you do an adequate screening of your tenants, you may avoid the entire eviction process from the start. You check a criminal background, you check the credit, you check the work history, and then you check the eviction history. Has this person ever been sued for eviction before? If so, that's a bad candidate for a tenant for you. Because here's something that we know absolutely. Tenants who have been evicted are the most likely to be evicted again. This next one is a pretty easy one. Talk to your tenants. If you don't already have an open communication pathway with your tenants, you should develop one. And really what you shouldn't do is let things slide. For example, late payments. You should be communicating with a notice to vacate quickly. Don't let things go beyond 5 days. If you haven't received a payment after 5 days from the due date, you need to submit a notice to vacate. This will express to your tenant in very clear language that late payment is not tolerated. But it works both ways. If your tenant has given you a message that a repair is needed, respond. Don't just leave your tenant hanging. If they've sent you an email or a text or called you on the phone requesting a repair, it's your duty as a landlord to make sure that any defect on the premises that affects the health or safety of an ordinary tenant is tended to within an adequate amount of time. So do your best to talk to your tenants and respond when they ask for help. Finally, do your inspections. If you're not inspecting at least semi-annually, you're not doing your job. My recommendation is a quarterly inspection, and let your tenant know up front that you intend to do it. In fact, you may book your quarterly visits at the time of the lease signing. We all have calendars and we know how they work. It's very easy to select certain days when you will be on the premises. And then do your best to stick to that time schedule. If you need to work out some change in the future, that should be all right because you've already established that this is something that you will do. And open lines of communication are always helpful, particularly when you need something or they need something. But without them, inevitably, we're left only with the courts and inevitably to eviction. Next, if you want to avoid eviction, you might have to release your tenants. You might have to employ a mutual release of the tenant obligation on the lease. It may come to a point where you and the tenant decide this is no longer a good fit. That shouldn't be 5 months after there's been no payment. My suggestion is within the first month, if you haven't received payment and there's no reasonable expectation that you will within the first 30 days, this is an option that you should strongly consider. You don't want to wait too long because ultimately your goal is to save money, not lose money. You don't gift rent to a tenant who, again, there's no reasonable expectation will pay the rent. So if you're within this 30-day period or a short time frame, you might propose a mutual release of the residential lease contract. Well, how does this work? Well, because you wrote a contract, the only way to undo that contract and for both parties to walk away from it is for another writing to be present. You can decide that by date X, the lease will end by agreement of all parties who signed the original lease. This mutual termination can end all the obligations as of that date. Now, it's important that this is connected to an actual handing over of the keys and a vacating of the premises. Without that, you don't have a legitimate termination. Additionally, you could go further. You could offer a full release of claims which might prevent any marks on credit history. It might prevent any potential future lawsuits from you. But what it does for you is it might essentially cut off the damage, stop the bleeding, prevent any future loss of rent. Your role is to avoid eviction as best that you can and to maximize your revenue as best as you can. And so sometimes that means cutting things off so that you don't have any additional losses. If your tenant is willing to walk away from the lease and vacate the premises so that you can re-let to somebody else, that might be the best thing for you both. My last piece of advice, you're not going to like it, but pay your tenants. Now at a certain point, not now, but at a certain point in the future, you may come to the conclusion that your best bet is to offer money to your tenants. Again, my recommendation is don't wait multiple months. If you're within the first or second month and it is clear that there is not a reasonable expectation that the tenant will be able to pay the rent, you may at that point offer first to simply reimburse the full or a portion of the security deposit so that the tenant may leave. Again, once you get past the first month, generally speaking, the security deposit is gone. The rent alone should essentially be, cover the full value of most security deposits. But you may still have funds there, or you may still have the ability to bargain with the security deposit. You may offer a portion or the full amount in exchange for keys. You've probably heard this phrase before, cash for keys. Don't ever extend money before the unit is emptied. You can write up an agreement that explains that if the tenant vacates by a certain date X and hands over the keys from a fully vacated property, they're entitled to Y, some amount. It may be that more money is required, and that's a calculation that you'll have to make. Does it make any sense to offer any portion of the security deposit back? Does it make any sense to offer possibly more of the security deposit back? What you have to consider is the likelihood that multiple months of rent will be lost with no reasonable hope of having them paid for. If that's the case, you may find yourself offering your tenant a sum of money that you would not otherwise offer in an effort to prevent future loss. Now, whatever you do, avoiding eviction, if you can, is often a good strategy. You can't always do it. And so if you have to file an eviction, make sure that you haven't waited multiple months before you're filing. If you need help, as always, my contact information is right here. If you need some pointers on additional videos to watch, try that one. It's a good one. I appreciate all of you. Again, I welcome your comments below. Tell me what you do to avoid evictions. Tell me what you've done in the past that's gotten you out of a jam where a tenant otherwise was not paying rent, but you worked out a deal with them that got them out of the unit so that you could re-let the property and continue to make money. As always, I welcome you. If you liked this video, go ahead and tell us below in the comments. Hit like, subscribe if you haven't done so already. And until next time, landlords, happy leasing. If you enjoyed this video, we invite you to like and subscribe. Follow our links to even more great content. We're always adding to this collection. If you have a video topic you'd like to see, comment below.